Welcome everyone. Very excited about this topic. Tile and stone is it's a complex phase of work. It's a phase that we've made a lot of money fixing other people's problems on, and we've lost a little money fixing our problems on. So it's important for all of us to understand some of the key points. I'm really excited. This presentation was developed a couple years ago with Guy Bottaro, who owns GLB Tile and Marble. They're our longest serving trade partner in this phase. He came up with some details that really made this all go so much better for everyone involved, and I'm excited to be able to show those to everyone as part of the standard way that we do things now. And I wanted to make sure he gets full credit because he did help invent these details. So why is this important? As I said, it's a complex assembly. Any tile assembly has a structural component which has to be adequate to support the loads. Many of them have waterproofing assemblies. If the waterproofing isn't done correctly or not integrated correctly, that can be a problem. And so for us as supervisors, as the general contractor, it's important that we know the role that each of these people has to play and make sure that they all get done correctly and in harmony with each other. So the other interesting thing is, they say you can't fix a problem unless it's a repeating problem. Well, this is a repeating problem around the DC area. It doesn't seem like people who do tile have been well educated or have the experience they need. We've had to bring all of our other tile companies up to speed on how to make sure we don't have leaks in showers, for example. So the good news is we can fix those problems, so I'm excited to show how we're doing that. All right. So our agenda for this presentation, there's 5 sections, and I'll try to have us take a deep breath between them. Some of them are pretty long. This is the most complex stuff that we talk about in these meetings. And again, before I get started, as I usually do, I'd like to mention that there are manuals and manufacturer's instructions. The TCNA has a book, Tile Council of North America, with hundreds of drawings in it. If we ever come across a situation we're not really clear about, we have these great books from industry groups, from manufacturers, instructions, videos. So there's a lot of great resources. Many of them are linked to on our internal wiki site. But if you give me a ring, I'm happy to help find them for you, bring them out to the job site too. So, section 1, showers. As I said, we've made a lot of money on showers that have failed and needed to be replaced. And we've spent some money on replacing showers that we did back in the 90s. So there's kind of 3 sections of this: what the problems are, how we came up with a way to solve most of the problems, and then there's a number of other kind of ancillary issues involving showers that we'll talk about too. So the main places we have problems with showers is where there's flat areas, and the curbs seem to be the worst one. I think because it's so low it gets a lot of water, and we drop a glass thing on top of it that tends to channel the water. So we seem to have a lot of issues with curbs, but we also have them on benches and half walls. We have issues where the drain connects to the waterproofing material. So there's a number of places where we've had issues. And a couple of other, valve openings where tubs are mounted in showers. All of those can give us an issue. The basic issue here is that tile is not waterproof. Right? Tile and grout will leak. Natural stone is very porous. It has veins running through it too. So you can pour a ton of water through a piece of limestone or a piece of marble, even if it doesn't have any cracks around it. But grout is porous, thinset is porous, all this stuff is porous. So if you take a shower every day and pour water on it, the water will go through those materials. So we need a complete waterproofing system underneath it all, or we'll have a problem in a shower. You can see in these pictures of glass tile where the water appears. Now this is a piece of limestone up on the top of this half wall. A lot of our tile and stone installers seem to think that's waterproof. I mean, it is a monolithic piece. Now I think some water does go through a porous stone like limestone, but I know a lot of it goes in at the end when that cracks, or goes in through the joint between it and the other materials. I mean, you can see it right there. There's a lot of water in that wall. So we have to be able to have a system under there to manage that water. And here's an example of what can happen if you don't. All right, we have a curb, and the waterproofing material only came to the edge any water that got in here could easily get into the wood that way or that way. So if it's not complete, over the years, you can have a lot of water get out of the assembly and damage the materials around it. Another thing, as I was mentioning earlier on a curb, when the glass guys come in to put their material on, they screw the metal track to the wall, and sometimes they screw it to the curb too. It pulls the materials apart. And in a wood frame structure, you're going to have cracking at any inside corner anyway because the wood will move underneath all of it. But this really exacerbates it, so they can push the materials apart and cause a crack. This is actually a shower rebuild that we were doing for a client, and we had just finished it, and then the glass guys came in, and I mean, I watched them crack the grout, like on day 0. And on the other end of it, they took the grout out of the way so their track could fit. So they kind of made a hole in the assembly, right? And then the other thing with these tracks is it's a C-shaped piece of metal. Now sometimes they have weep holes in them, like this one. This track all has weep holes in it, but the real low point isn't actually the weep holes, it's the joints between the tracks. So the joints are right over top of the cracks in the grout. I mean, you can even see it right here. There's a crack under there. And then they completely seal the outer and inner edge of it. So it kind of channels water into the vulnerable areas of the curb. So curbs really get a ton of water, and sometimes this is the result. So luckily we have a really good solution for curbs. I'll get into that in a bit. Another issue we have had occasionally is the connection between the drain and the waterproofing pan. And I'll talk about the key issues with that. Another thing that can happen that you really have to be careful about is you can do a good drain and a good pan and then poke holes in the pan and then build your shower. And you don't want to poke holes in the pan, right? So this shower, everything was beautiful about it except there were some holes in it. So the waterproofing leaked. Another issue you can have with the pan is if the pan is not sloped underneath it, water will build up in there and it smells like a swamp and it makes efflorescence come out of the joints in the floor and the caulking won't stick around the perimeter. So, now when people call us and say, I've got this, my bathroom smells funny and there's white stuff on the floor and the caulk won't stick, I mean, we already know what's wrong with it. And it's expensive, but it's easy to fix. Another thing is people seem to want to clog up the weep holes in the pan. So even if there is a slope, all of these little slots in this device are supposed to be weep holes for water to go through, and somebody very carefully put a whole bunch of goop under there and prevented any water from going through the water escape holes, so the water just built up in the pan. And in this shower, they found a hole in the pan, and that caused us to tear it all out. As I said, benches and half walls, other horizontal areas are an issue. One of the important things with waterproofing materials is they usually come in a flat sheet and they don't go around a 3-dimensional corner. So at the end of this bench over here, there's going to be a place where you need a special piece, and it was not installed on this shower, so there's just a big hole. We'll talk about that when we get to that part. Another interesting thing that can happen is, when you have a bathtub come into the shower, that has to be waterproofed. Curbs need to be waterproofed. Walls need to be waterproofed. And if you do absolutely everything wrong, then you have to call us to rebuild your master bedroom, and we're taking your curb out in hands full of dust and there's live termites in it. So, if you think about it, it rains a lot in a shower, right? I mean, it rains a couple times a week outside, but it's like twice a day in a master shower, and it can be a lot of water. Okay, so as I said, we came up with a way to stop any of these issues from happening, and it's our standard construction method. It's a double layer of waterproofing. And a guy came up with this, and we adopted it quickly. It's a really great idea. Here's a drawing which kind of shows the gist of it. I will end up going through each part, but you can see at the bottom we start with sloping underneath the pan material. Then we put in a waterproof plumber's pan. We use that terminology because it's the standard terminology that's been used. It's actually a piece of flexible membrane. Plumber's pan. Then we put in the tile setting materials, which is mud on the floor and Durock on the walls. Then we waterproof over top of that in the key areas. And that's really the key thing, is to waterproof over top of the curb, the benches, the knee walls, all that stuff. And then we put the tile on top of all that. So it's really 90% of this meeting actually isn't really about tile and stone. It's about the stuff under it. Okay. How do we slope the floor underneath the pan? The way we really do it on almost all of our jobs nowadays is we call the tile guys, and they come in and they spread mortar out from the drain sloped up away from the drain. And most of our tile guys are used to doing this. They just come run in. It's a very quick process. You can use just about anything you want. We've used plywood. It actually used to be the standard to use sand. That's still in the book. So this isn't really a structural material. All it has to do is not compress under the material, under the shower. So, but we usually use mortar because it stays in place and makes a nice, neat job. That's how we standardly do it. There is another way. We have done it in the past that we haven't really had any issues with, so I'll just mention it really quickly. You can use a sloped piece of plywood by putting a bunch of shims and glue under it. It's not in the industry standard book, but if you're having a hassle getting your tile guys there, you can do this. It's pretty easy. But it's not, you don't need to, go ahead.
Yeah, they make a pre-slope kit, the little plastic strips you can buy at the tile store to go from 3/4 to nothing.
Right, they have a pre-slope kit. Yeah, so you can, to help make it easy to slope. Yeah, there's no reason not to use those, except I'm not sure you need them. Our tile guys all know how to screed out the mortar pretty quickly and easily. Yeah. Okay, any questions on the slope? Other than that, very good one. Okay, so we call that a pre-slope, put it under the pan. Now we're going to do a plumber's pan. Interestingly, a lot of times the plumbers don't install the plumber's pan. We have our tile guys just like to do it because they're very neat with it and it doesn't make their tile setting materials bulge out and it doesn't get in the way of them doing a neat job with the tile. So 2 of our tile companies do this and 2 of them do not. So you gotta have to know who you're working with and what they're willing to do. But this is the bottom of the whole system. If any water gets through this, you're gonna have a problem. So we do have to be very careful with this layer. All right, so let me start with a bi-level drain. This is the kind of drain that we use, right? This is what you see at the top, just this metal bit. And then there's the tile and the setting bed come up to the edge. And then the plumber's pan material comes in down at this lower level. And there are weep holes, which these blue strings represent the water going through the weep holes down at the bottom. All right, so let me go ahead and pop this off. As I said, there are 4 pieces. The bottom flange piece, or the drain body, the clamp ring, and then what's called the beauty ring, which the grate attaches to. Okay. So in order to do this correctly, there's a few steps. The first one is, as represented by this fluorescent glue, you actually, normally, according to the directions, you're supposed to glue the drain body, which is on the ground, to the bottom of your shower pan membrane. So this is a step that is actually often omitted and usually doesn't cause any issues. And the reason is that the drain body and the clamp ring have a configuration where when you clamp them together with the bolts, it pinches the material and will not let water leak through. So as long as that part works correctly, the glue doesn't actually help with anything. So there are hundreds and hundreds of showers, ones that we've done and everyone else has done, that don't have any glue and aren't leaking. But having said that, it is in the instructions to use the glue. And it is a nice extra that can take care of if one of these bolts doesn't clamp down correctly or there's a lump of material or something in there, the glue will save you. So we want to use the glue. Which glue do you use? You're going to read the manual, right? Different materials have different sealers depending on what they're made of. Okay, so now we've glued the bottom flange down, or put glue on and put the pan on top of it. Then we're going to attach the clamp ring. See if I can get the water to go in correctly. Yep, bolts keep loosening. Anyway, the bolts go in and tighten down, and as I said, you can see the water can still go through the weep holes down into the drain. So that's why we don't put any sealant under here or on top of the pan material. we just put glue under here because any water that leaks through here is out into the house. So we don't want that to happen. We want that to be fully sealed, but we want water to run across the top of the pan down into the drain through the weep holes. Okay, so you're gonna have to keep an eye on that. We see a lot of this. This is what it looks like in real life. This shower pan material uses a blue goopy glue. It's squeezed up through the holes where the bolts are. So there is a little bit on top of the pan, but we did not glue on top of the pan material. It's all underneath. And then the clamp ring holds it down. And as I said, once those bolts are tightened and it pushes it down into the slot, it's really watertight. This is an example of an overzealous plumber who sealed around, blocked up all the weep holes. Right? Meant well, thought, oh, I'll just keep putting goop on this thing until it's done. And that's going to interfere with the ability of that to drain. And here's two more, the one we saw earlier, and another one that we tore out because the shower was failing. All right. So now we have the drain connection done correctly. We're going to continue with installing the pan material. Many of our showers are over 6 feet in one direction, and that's how wide this sheet material is. So we often have seams. So to seam it, you're going to use the special glue that the manufacturer says to, whether that's a blue caulky stuff, or sometimes it's a PVC glue-looking material, but it's special for shower pans. So it's a solvent-based thin glue. And then you're also going to use these preformed corner pieces when you get to any of the corners at the curb or the bench. Right? This is a three-dimensional shape that you really can't make with a flat piece of material. So for a while they actually had these at home centers, but I haven't seen them there in a while. But you can get them at plumbers and tile shops. So they're very easy to access and they really have to be used. These are examples of corners where people tried to do them but didn't use those corner pieces. So you can see there's a hole here. There should be one of those preformed corners going around this whole corner here, as well as the outside corner. And this is the corner of a bench. It should have a preformed corner on it. And also, all of this bench material should be going down into the lower pan, not landing behind it. So we want to lap things correctly. Okay. Curbs have 4 corners, right? 2 at each end. So you need 4 corner patches to do a curb. Benches have 2 corners, 1 at each end. You need 2 corner patches to do a bench correctly. Okay. What material do we want to use for the plumber's pan? There's a little bit of an issue with this. Noble chloralloy is made of a better material than the PVC liners. PVC is a rigid material, you know, it's like a vinyl window. That's how it naturally comes out. They have to add a lot of softeners to it to make it flexible. The softeners leave it. After a couple of decades, we think the material is no longer soft and it will fail. How long are our clients going to want their showers not to fail? I don't know. I mean, are any of us going to be working in this business in 30 years? That's about my retirement date. We'll see. Anyway, this is a better material. It's a little bit more expensive. Some of our plumbers like it. Some of our plumbers charge a lot extra for it. Some of our plumbers refuse to use it. I don't think this is a make or break issue, but this is better material than Noble chloralloy. All right, so it's in. Now we have to protect it, right? We don't want to poke holes in it. We're going to put down a protective material. Foam board's nice because you can't grind a screw through the material with foam board. The foam board's too soft. So that's a nice option. Another is to just leave the water in it. That also works well, but the next trade who comes in a lot of times is the drywallers, and they're on stilts, so they'll just walk right through the water. So it doesn't work that well. The other option is I wrote in here, you can just place the mortar, have the tile guys come in and put their mortar bed in as soon as you pass the flood test, and then you're safe and protected and they're a step ahead. All right, any questions on the shower pan? Go ahead, Reed.
Do we normally slope the curb before?
Do we pre-slope the curb? Yeah, that's a great question. Usually we don't, but we probably should, shouldn't we? Yeah, I guess if you can get that done, it's worth a shot.
I just did it between the two 2x4s and take a shim.
Mm-hmm. So you just put shims under the last 2x4 so the top one was sloped a little bit, just like we do with windows. That's a great idea. Okay, I'm going to rewrite the standard. Okay, any other questions on that? Okay. Another part of step 2 is getting a water management layer on the walls. So we need something to waterproof the walls. The standard way to do it, right in the books, is to use a membrane, quote unquote, between the studs and the backer board. So you take a sheet of plastic and staple it up on the studs, put it inside the shower pan so any water that gets through the walls lands inside the shower pan, and then you put up your backer board. You can also use felt. So this is an old standard method that actually doesn't seem to have been used very much around here, but has been used some. So I know some tile guys will ask you about it, but not all. So we want to do that, either plastic or felt. I personally think felt has some minor building science-y advantages on exterior walls, so I would use felt on an exterior wall. But plastic is totally fine in the rest of the house. And it's a very easy step. I think a lot of times we end up doing it because it's not included in either whoever's hanging the wallboard doesn't include it in their bid, so we end up doing it. And you can see in this picture how it tucks into either a shower receptor or a bathtub or into the shower pan, right? It just runs down the studs and lands inside the water collecting thing at the bottom.
So are you taking that from floor to ceiling?
Does it go from floor to ceiling? It should probably go at least as high as the shower heads, anywhere that's going to get wet. Yeah.
And do you just let it drape down, attach it on the top and just let it drape down?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to have 50 holes in it when you attach the backer board, so you can staple it up if you want.
It just acts as a secondary.
Right. Yep. Good questions. Yeah, you can staple it or you can attach it just at the top. Either way is fine. Okay. One quick note on that. Some of our tile companies put a waterproofing membrane on the front side of the Duroc after the Duroc's installed. If they're going to do that and they're going to go up to the shower heads, you don't need something else behind the Duroc. You just need one layer somewhere. So either behind the Duroc or in front of the Duroc. So just in case they're doing that, you don't need extra. All right, so that's what this wiggly line is back here. That's the plastic. Okay, any questions on that? All right. Okay, now the tile guys come in and they set the backer board and they do mud on the floor and sometimes on the top of the curb and the top of the benches. So for us, the concrete backer board units, Duroc, Permabase, those are the good materials. We have one tile guy who likes Hardy backer. Hardy backer has a lot of wood fiber in it, so I'm a little suspicious of it in a very wet environment. He actually follows the directions though, where he keeps it up out of the mud at the bottom and whatever other little directions Hardy has. I think it's fine if you're careful with the directions. We've never had a problem with it, but everyone else seems to just want to use the CBUs. I mean, those you can soak in a bucket for a decade and nothing happens to them, so I'm pretty confident in those. The gypsum-based materials, we want to stay away from those. Gypsum is not inherently water resistant, and there's a lot of rules and instructions on how to seal the edges and keep them up and all this dumb stuff. Like, why bother? Just use something that won't fall apart if it gets wet. It's a shower. We do want to minimize the fasteners that are below the curb. We want it to be able to fill up to the top of the curb. Hopefully it doesn't happen too often, but shower drains do get clogged and sometimes it takes an inch or two of water before someone notices. So we want to have no or very few fasteners down low. If you're clever with the Duroc and the mud, you can cover the inside of the curb without using any fasteners. But we're going to use another layer of waterproofing over all of it, so it's okay if there's a screw or two. All right, any questions on that? So that's actually the simpler part for us to manage. The tile guys know what they're doing. As long as they don't put a lot of holes in the liner, there's nothing that can go wrong. Here's the big win that guy came up with, putting another layer of waterproofing on these areas where we keep having problems. So we call it our secondary waterproofing, and usually we've been using a sheet membrane like Kerdi. Kerdi is a Schluter product. It's a very flexible, thin polyethylene membrane. It's actually the same material as the noble chloralloy. It should last a long time. And it has this fleece on both sides, So thin set sticks to it. So you comb out thin set on the wall, stick it to the thin set, and then tile will stick to that with thin set. So I think this has saved us a ton of money and aggravation. What are the areas that we want to put it on? Anything that's flat, anywhere where there's going to be water. Down here at the bottom of your shampoo niche, on top of your curb, on top of your benches, half walls. One important thing to note is that since there's going to be water here, water's going to be going down the wall from there. So we want to run the Kerdi all the way down into the waterproofing pan, right? So it should go to the floor from any of these things. You can't just cover the top and then leave it. You got to go all the way down. Another important thing to note, this layer is doing work. So especially at the curbs, I'm sure there's going to be a ton of water on these. And we want to build this waterproofing layer so it really holds water. And that means using the preformed corners at the corners. Again, on a curb you need 4. On a bench you need 2. And it means extending it out so that we have some protection even a few inches away from anywhere where we know we'll have water. So this shower is an example of trying to do it right but not quite getting it. We stopped the Kerdi right at the edge of the curb, and the water soaked into the drywall. So that was bad. This is a better example of how you can run the Kerdi all the way past the curb. And generally speaking, we want to go a couple of inches. This isn't enough. This is enough. This is enough. One of the things that one of our guys figured out pretty recently is you can run the Kerdi out onto drywall and then just mud over it with drywall mud. It acts like drywall tape. So you really don't have to spend a lot of time thinking about how far to run it. You just run it out wild, however far a couple inches or so, and then put whatever finishes you're putting up, and then cover the rest with a little bit of drywall mud. Sound good? Okay. So the curb's going to leak. The waterproofing has to be good. This is 0 inches. This is 2 inches or more. That's much better. One question that has come up a few times is, do we cover the floor with this secondary waterproofing membrane? I think there's pluses and minuses. You can do it. I think it's a good idea if you're using a light colored stone, because those sometimes absorb, they'll change colors if they get minerals in them, and I'm really not sure what's in that mortar bed. Like, that's commodity cement that came from who knows where and has who knows what in it. It could have a lot of iron in it. If it does, that could get into the marble. So it's a good idea to separate that and just have that nice thin set on top of the Kerdi membrane that won't change the color of the marble. Floor heat requires a membrane separating it from the water, so you need it for that. But I don't think it's really needed. We have a full waterproofing membrane under that we think is going to be wet under some circumstances, so it should be fine. And then where does the water go? If you're putting it on top of the mud bed, it's coming in about here, right below the top of the grate. That's nowhere near the weep holes way down here. So how do you handle, where does that water go? And you can see on this one job, we actually drilled holes in the beauty ring of a grate. I learned that from Michael Byrne, who's written a couple of books about tile. So it seems like a reasonable idea, but it's kind of half-baked. I don't know. It's a lot of work, and I'm not sure it gets you much on some jobs. So just to clarify, there's other materials besides Kerdi that are fine. This Latacrete Hydraband sheet membrane is virtually the same exact material, so it does the same thing in the same way. Noble makes a similar material. Duroc even makes a similar material. I got a feeling there's a factory somewhere and they just changed the printing on it. I'm not really sure, but it could be. The liquid products, I'm not as sure about. I am sure that if you do the liquid products correctly, they're just as good as the sheet materials. But there's a number of steps. You have to tape all the joints in the Duroc, usually with thin set and fiberglass tape. You have to wait for that to dry. Sometimes there's a special corner treatment, like a fabric you embed in the liquid. Then you have to wait for that to dry, roll it on the whole wall, find the pinholes, fix all the pinholes with drying in between them. So I think the couple of times I've talked to a tile company and I've asked them, are they going to do all those things? They just go back to using the sheet membranes because it's faster and less labor. So, here's an example of someone kind of trying to do it and not quite doing it. They didn't fix up these joints So there's really holes in the waterproofing right here. And that's not going to do us any good. So as I said, you can do it right. I think the sheet goods are so much faster that that's what everyone does. All right, any questions on that? Okay. Okay. We're getting there. We're getting there. Okay. Last step, actually tiling and grouting. So we don't have a lot of problems with tiling and grouting. We have a lot of issues with the stuff under it. But I will mention a couple things. One is we always want to use a dry mix thin set that you add water to, and then a chemical reaction happens within it, and it never returns to a liquid state, right? Like cement. It's actually cement. There's stuff that comes in buckets that says thin set, but it depends on drying for it to set. And if you re-wet it, it will undry and turn into muck again. And in a shower, that's a problem. So we actually, I've seen a lot of showers. I'm sure you all have if you've been in the business for a couple of decades, where they use that mastic stuff that comes out of a bucket. And you keep it wet, it'll turn back into liquid and the tiles will fall off the walls. So we don't use that stuff. Another quick thing, all the tiles should be covered fully on the back, not blobs on the corners and smushed on, right? It should be combed out with a trowel. With a trowel. So you want to fully cover it. And then getting the grouting done correctly is a lot of work. You have to push it pretty hard into the joints. But all the tile guys that we work with know this. It's just every once in a while we get a new crew. You just have to know what to look for. All right, that's it on the BOWA Standard. Any questions on any of that?
Do you recommend sealing the grout?
Do we recommend sealing the grout? That's a really good question. I don't know how to seal just the grout. Do you?
No.
Yeah.
I mean, they got grout sealer.
Oh, do they? Okay.
Yeah.
We usually don't seal just the grout. So, but if someone comes up with a great way to do it, I don't know why we wouldn't try that. But to date, we haven't done that very much. Yeah. Any other questions? Go ahead.
Do we apply sealer to every, I would say, do we seal tile and grout every shower application?
We don't usually seal tile because most tile it's fairly impermeable, right? The sealer doesn't stick to it. Actually, that's one of the weird things with the grout sealer is you're supposed to paint just the joint, right?
Yeah, so if you got it on the tile, depending on what type of material.
Right.
But
natural stone's a whole different story. And we usually do seal natural stone in showers. Yeah, because that's so porous. Yeah, that's a really good question. Okay. All right. Okay, take a deep breath. That was by far the longest part of this whole thing. And that was a lot. So congratulations. All right, let's talk about a few other quick things with showers. There is another way to do a shower that does not have 2 layers of waterproofing. It has 1. It is the Schluter system shower. It uses a special single level drain. It doesn't have another layer under it. So we're going to start with the drain. And actually, here's a slot version of that. You're going to set this in the floor, and it already has Kerdi attached to it. And you just run Kerdi from here out to the edge of the wall and all the way up the wall to above the shower head and over the curb. And that's your whole waterproofing system, just the Kerdi. So what's to like about this? What's not to like about it? Well, there's a couple of things. I actually think the industry seems to be heading that way. We may end up with a lot of our tile companies wanting to only do that. The only issue with that is it has to be perfect, right? There's no redundancy at all. If you have a plumber's pan that goes underneath your Durock on the side, you can soak a little water into the Durock, it'll trickle down through and end up coming out, no problem. If you have a hole in the waterproofing in the Kerdi near your drain, it goes down to the pan and goes into the weep holes. So there's redundancy in the way that we normally do them. In this system, there's no redundancy. And I've seen a number of tile companies who, for some reason, don't seem to understand how important it is that the Kerdi be perfect and that it run anywhere where there's going to be water. So sometimes they run it up this high. And any water that leaks through the wall up here is out of the system. It's into the house. So you have to be careful with that. No redundancy, no mistakes. We have to be on our toes with those guys. So besides things like the ends of the curb that I'm showing here, The key thing with Kerdi to make it 100% watertight is a 2-inch overlap everywhere you have an overlap, right? So all the joints between sheets have to have a 2-inch overlap. These corner pieces are 2 inches on each direction. A good rule for how far to go outside the shower is 2 inches, not 0 inches, not 0 inches, 2 inches. So our tile guys we need to make sure that they understand that. They're using the correct corner pieces and they're overlapping everything by 2 inches everywhere. And that's the key to that whole system. All right, so slot drains, as I mentioned, these are, I think these are really cool looking actually, right? You drop that in, set the tile, put the grate in it. It's a really nice look. With this particular drain, you can get pretty close to the wall. And by the time you put a thick tile on there with a little bit of thin set, it'll be almost to the edge of the grate. But you'd have to frame the shower to fit the drain, right? So some of the drains come in 5 or 6 sizes, and if you want it to go wall to wall, you frame the shower to meet it. Others come in sizes like multiple per inch, or they even come in things where you cut off the ends and glue them back together. So the key thing to these is to read the directions before you even order the drain, because you got to make sure your whole system's set up and you order the correct drain. And there can be a significant lead time on these. So I think they're really neat, but we want to make sure we're ahead of the game on that. If you're running one of these projects, it's probably one of the first things I would do is make sure that I fully understood the directions for the drain and which one we're getting. If it's one of these type of drains that is not a bi-level one, then we really have to be careful with that waterproofing system, right? It's the only waterproofing layer. Okay, sorry, any questions on that on slot drains?
That drain itself is sloped to the center of it.
Yeah, most of them are. Not much, but a little.
Enough to-
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if you can see that. That's probably a 1/4 inch over the whole length.
It's level across the top.
Right. Yep. By the way, there actually are a couple of these drains that fit into the regular drain body. So they're like a slot drain that just drops into here. So you can build them with a redundant bi-level shower pan. So I kind of like those, but you can't really go wall to wall with those. All right, steam showers. A couple of key points on steam showers. There's an enormous amount of moisture in those, right? Have you ever watched one go? You can't even see, it's just a big gray piece of glass once you get it really going. So you really have to keep all that inside the room. And that means the waterproofing has to go all the way up and across the very sloped ceiling. Slope ceiling now, they're saying 2 inches per foot slope if you don't want to feel drips on you. So we want to cover all of it, including the slope ceiling. The Noble membrane people told me that you can put it above the Duroc on the ceiling. I'm not sure how you would actually do that, but they told me you could. So I don't know, that's something to think about if your tile guys are nervous about putting this stuff on it. The fluid applied waterproofings are usually not a good vapor barrier, so we don't want to use those in a steam shower. And that's what it ends up looking like, right? That picture from before, that's a steam shower, completely covered in Kerdi all over. As far as I know, none of those tiles have fallen off on our clients' heads, so it does work. Good to know. All right, a couple other quick points on steam showers. You want to read and follow the directions that come with the unit. There's a lot of complicated things, where the controls and heads are so you don't burn yourself and you don't zap the controls, stuff like that. The ceiling, as I said, very, very serious slope. And we've been putting a fan or a remote mounted fan with an inlet in the shower because all that moisture turns into a mildew nightmare if you don't dry it out by having a fan in the room with the steam unit. So just FYI. Okay, another part of this shower grab bag. We have had some leaks at valves, and there's a couple of ways to handle those better than others. So these two pictures are actually not a job that we did, but one that we were working on doing some other stuff, and the client said, hey, what's going on with this water? They had, someone had sealed all the way around their escutcheon. Water was getting in where the valve stem pops out the middle, and it filled up, couldn't leave, it filled up the escutcheon and went into the wall. So, and we have had a leak or two like that in the history of BOWA. So you really want to make sure you seal or manage any water that leaks past the escutcheon at the waterproofing layer if you can, like in these pictures in the upper corner where it shows either using these Kerdi accessories or using the Kerdi goop to seal around the penetrations. These are the accessories. These are actually really neat. They're sort of shaped like a cone, so water kind of can't go in there. If it hits it, it'll run out to the outside face of the wall. Really neat idea. Unfortunately, they don't seem to ever fit the valves that we're using. I mean, like every time they don't fit. So that isn't quite true. And they do have small ones that are perfect for shower heads and tub spouts. We actually recently had a leak where a handheld shower fitting was leaking water and it would spray back into the wall, and because it wasn't sealed, it was running down outside of the waterproofing. So this does happen, and it's a really good idea to try to get ahead of it one way or another. Okay, any questions on that? Okay. Another issue we've had is where the drywall ties in. I think with our extended Kerdi, this has been much better, but the key thing I would say here is if you don't want to see rust, use a vinyl corner bead. And there's a number of different types of vinyl corner bead that you can apply before or after the stone and tile that can make this work pretty well. So just try to make sure we aren't putting in a rusty metal piece where we know we'll have water. So sometimes our clients ask us to do a roll-in shower, and when they do, we want to have a 2-inch minimum from the top of the drain to the top of the slope. That's code. Now, there are projects where we won't have enough room to do that much, but you know, it's against code, so you have to get a code exception. Fairfax County has an official policy. If you write them a letter that says, I need to do a roll-in shower and I can't get enough 2 inches of slope, they'll give you an exception, but we have to ask for it ahead of time. And you know, when you think about it, 2 inches isn't that much, right? Because the shower drain's going to clog at some point, and then the water's going to start filling up. And are they going to notice it before 2 inches fills up? Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, the more I think about it, the more I think 2 inches is a pretty good rule. So I don't know. Depends on your configuration whether you can get it or not. Okay. All right, so here's one where we actually had another couple of issues. This is, I love this one. Let's say you start taking a shower in here. Is all the water going to go down the tub drain? Yeah. Some of the water. What if the water lands here? Where's that going? What if you put a glass wall here? Then where would the water go? Then it would have to go through the tile into the wall. So this is not an ideal configuration, right? This is an example of something that is very obvious will not work. But we kind of end up accidentally doing something like this sometimes. People want a big whirlpool tub and they want it to go wall to wall like a regular small tub. But the key advantage to a regular small tub is it has a flange on it, right? So it goes behind the tile and up the wall, and any water that hits the tile has to go into the tub. So if you put a regular deck mount tub in, the water can just go right off the edge because there's no flange behind the tile. So we want to make sure we get a tub with a flange. There are add-on kits, which is what I'm showing in this picture here. This is a kind of a piece of vinyl that you glue to your deck-mounted tub, and that makes it so the water can't quite go through, hopefully, as long as it's stuck. You know, I'm a little nervous about how long that'll last, so I don't think that's as good. I think lately we've been buying flanged tubs. It's been working well. This is a picture from the TCNA manual showing the flange turning up the wall behind the setting materials. And this is an example of a tub that does not have either a built-in flange or a flange kit. And that's pretty much guaranteed to leak, right? So we don't ever want to see that. Okay. Got to manage that water off the front edge too. When we have a tub deck that sticks into the shower, I think you just run the Kerdi as far as you can, right? The water that lands here doesn't know that there's a piece of glass up above it, and it'll just soak through as far as it can. So you better run your waterproofing pretty far. If your tub is really at the edge of the vertical, you can waterproof all the way up and underneath the tub, so any water that comes off the front edge of the tub is protected by the waterproofing. In this case, we ran the shower pan liner all the way up, and then we also ran the Kerdi second waterproofing all the way up. And at the end, it looks the same as it ever would have, but it's protected by 2 layers of waterproofing. And windows are kind of similar, right? They're like a niche or a ledge. I think with a window, we slope to the outside under the window, and then on a ledge or a niche in a shower, we'd want to slope to the inside. So I think as long as the two are glued together really well or overlap each other really well, then your waterproofing goes both directions. You should be fine. And one other quick hint we learned: if you're setting marble in a shower, don't use wood shims because the wood will be soaking wet, and then the tannins will soak into the marble. So use plastic shims. Okay, we've made it through showers. They're difficult, and we use 2 layers of waterproofing. Okay? All right. Any questions on any of that? Okay, again, let's take a deep breath. That was more than half of what we're going to talk about today.